Listen to my old voice and rest. The wind howls outside this cave, but you are safe now within these walls of stone. The past cannot hurt you here, my name. I suppose it matters little now, though once it was spoken with venom throughout Judea. I am Judas of Kerioth. Judas Iscariot, they called me, the betrayer, the one who sold the Nazarene for silver. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. 40 years I have lived in this wilderness, alone with my thoughts and the whispers of the desert. 40 years since I walked away from Jerusalem, the weight of 30 silver pieces burning in my pouch like hot coals. Can you hear the wind outside? It carries the sound of coins, always jingling, always reminding, you are safe now. This was long ago. I was not always this withered husk you see before you. Once I was strong, ambitious, full of fire for the liberation of our people. The Romans and their puppet kings had ground us beneath their sandals for too long. We waited for the Messiah, the one foretold, who would cast out the oppressors and restore the kingdom of David. Listen to my old voice and rest. See how my hands tremble in the candlelight. These hands once counted silver. These hands once pointed to a man in a garden. These hands never found the courage to fashion a noose, though many believe they did. The histories written of me say I hanged myself in remorse. Perhaps it would have been better if I had. The past cannot hurt you here, though it has never stopped hurting me. Even now, as the sands of my life run low, I feel the weight of that night pressing upon my chest. The air in this cave grows thinner with each passing year, or perhaps it is just these old lungs failing at last. Can you hear the wind outside? Sometimes I fancy it carries his voice, still speaking those perplexing parables, still challenging the comfortable and comforting the broken. I was neither comfortable nor broken enough to truly hear him. Not until it was too late. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. Let me tell you what really happened. Not the tale they inscribe on parchment, not the story they whisper in synagogues and secret gatherings. My truth, my burden. You are safe now. This was long ago. I joined him early, you know. I was among the first he called. I remember the day, the air thick with heat, the dust of the road coating my sandals, my throat parched from travel. I had gone to hear the Baptist, that wild man of the desert who spoke of one to come. And there, by the shores of the Jordan, I first saw him. He was unremarkable to look upon. No beauty that we should desire him, as the prophet says. Just a carpenter's son from Nazareth, a backwater town of no consequence. But when he spoke, it was as if the very stones might cry out in response. There was authority in his voice, not like the scribes who endlessly debated the minutiae of law. Listen to my old voice and rest. I approached him that evening as the crowds dispersed. His eyes, I have never forgotten his eyes. They seemed to look through me, past the carefully constructed facade I presented to the world, into the darkest corners of my being. I felt naked before that gaze, exposed and known. Follow me, he said simply, and I did. Without question, without hesitation, I left my life behind and followed. Me, Judas of Kerioth, educated and connected from a family of some means. I was not like the others, the fisherman, the tax collector, the zealot. I could read and write in several tongues. I understood politics and the movements of power. I had contacts in Jerusalem, in the temple. I was valuable. The past cannot hurt you here. Can you hear the wind outside? It moans through the rocks like a spirit in torment. Much like my own spirit has moaned these 40 years. The sound reminds me of that first night with the group, sleeping under stars, the breeze carrying whispers of possibility. I believed then, oh, how fervently I believed. The kingdom he spoke of seemed so tangible, so imminent. We would overthrow the Romans, purify the temple, restore Israel to glory. At least, that is what I thought he meant. That is what we all thought he meant. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. They made me keeper of the common purse, a position of trust. My education suited me for it. I could keep accounts, negotiate purchases, ensure we had what we needed as we traveled from village to village. He trusted me with this responsibility. Or perhaps he knew even then what I would become and gave me the means to fulfill that dark purpose. You are safe now. This was long ago. Those early days were filled with wonder. The lame walked, the blind saw, the lepers were cleansed. Crowds gathered wherever we went, straining to hear his words, to touch the hem of his garment. We were at the center of something momentous, something world-changing. I remember a day by the sea. Thousands had gathered to hear him teach. The sun beat down mercilessly. We had no provisions for such a multitude. The others worried, suggested sending the people away to find food in the surrounding villages. But he would not hear of it. You give them something to eat, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Philip, practical, literal-minded. Philip pointed out the obvious. 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Listen to my old voice and rest. I remember calculating the cost in my head, the mental arithmetic automatic after years of managing our finances. Philip was right. The cost would be ruinous. Even if there had been vendors nearby with sufficient stock, which there were not. Then Andrew found a boy with 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. A poor man's lunch, barely enough for the child himself. But how far will they go among so many? Andrew asked, echoing my own thoughts. The past cannot hurt you here, though the memory of what happened next still sends shivers through my withered frame. He took those loaves, gave thanks, and began breaking them. And breaking them, and breaking them. The pieces never diminished. They multiplied. The same with the fish. We distributed food to thousands, men, women, children, and all ate until satisfied. 12 baskets of leftovers we collected afterward, 1 for each of us apostles, though I often wondered if it was a coincidence or another of his meaningful gestures. Can you hear the wind outside? It has calmed somewhat. The storm passes, just as all storms eventually must. I have weathered many in this cave, huddled by a meager fire, alone with my memories and regrets. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. That day by the sea was a turning point, though I did not recognize it then. The people wanted to make him king by force after that miracle. It made perfect sense. Here was our military leader, able to feed an army from nothing, able to heal wounded soldiers, able to inspire with his words. The time was ripe for rebellion. But he withdrew, slipped away into the hills alone. I could not understand it. The moment was perfect, the people were ready, and he simply walked away. It was the first seed of doubt in my mind, the first whisper that perhaps I had misunderstood his mission entirely. You are safe now. This was long ago. I should speak of the money, for that is what most remember of me. The one who betrayed him for silver, they say, as if it were that simple, as if mere coins could have motivated such an action. Yes, I kept the purse, and yes, sometimes I took from it. Small amounts, never enough to be noticed. I told myself it was compensation for my unique skills, for the connections I maintained in Jerusalem that benefited our group. The others, simple men, most of them, did not understand the complexities of our political moment. The delicate negotiations required the bribes sometimes necessary to secure safe passage or favorable treatment. Listen to my old voice and rest. I can still feel the weight of that purse against my hip as we walked the dusty roads of Galilee. Leather worn, smooth from handling, the clink of coins a constant accompaniment to our journeys. I grew protective of it, irritated when resources were wasted. There was a night in Bethany, at the home of Lazarus. Yes, the same Lazarus he had raised from the dead. Another miracle that both awed and unsettled me. His sister Mary took an alabaster jar of perfume, pure nard, expensive beyond reason. She broke it open and poured it on his feet, filling the house with fragrance, then wiped his feet with her hair. An intimate act, unseemly to my eyes. The past cannot hurt you here. I spoke up then, my voice sharp with indignation. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. A reasonable objection, was it not? We had hungry people following us, widows and orphans depending on our charity. And here was this woman, wasting a fortune on a fleeting gesture. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew my concern was not truly for the poor. It was for the purse I carried, for the coins that would have passed through my hands. He rebuked me, gently, as was his way, but firmly nonetheless. Leave her alone. She has done a beautiful thing. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. Can you hear the wind outside? It carries the scent of myrrh and aloes tonight, the burial spices I never saw applied to his broken body. Sometimes the desert wind seems to carry all my memories, all my regrets, swirling them around this cave like spectres. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. Burial. He spoke often of his death in those final weeks. Too often, it troubled the others, but it troubled me most of all. What kind of Messiah speaks constantly of defeat and death? Where was the triumphant king we had been promised? Where was the liberator of Israel? I began to wonder if he had lost his resolve, if the pressure of his calling had broken something essential within him, or worse, if he had been a false hope all along. The doubt gnawed at me, growing stronger with each passing day, with each perplexing parable, with each opportunity for decisive action that he let slip away. You are safe now. This was long ago. We came to Jerusalem for Passover. The city was swollen with pilgrims, tense with expectation. Roman soldiers patrolled the streets in greater numbers during the festival, wary of Jewish nationalism flaring into rebellion. The air felt charged, ready for a spark. And then, the triumphant entry. He sent us to fetch a donkey, not a war horse, and he rode into Jerusalem with crowds shouting Hosanna and laying palm branches before him. A king's welcome, yet he came in humility, fulfilling Zechariah's prophecy. Even in this moment of acclaim, he defied expectations. Listen to my old voice and rest. I watched the faces in that crowd, saw the hope blazing in their eyes. They believed their deliverer had come at last. Yet I had heard his troubling talk of death, had seen his reluctance to seize power when offered. I feared he would disappoint them all, that we had followed him for nothing. The past cannot hurt you here. The temple. I must tell you of the temple. The day after his arrival, he went to the temple courts and flew into a rage unlike anything I had seen from him before. He overturned the tables of the money changers, scattered the coins across the stone floor. How they rang out, like the 30 pieces that would soon weigh down my own purse. He drove out those selling sacrificial animals, shouting that they had made his father's house a den of robbers. Here, at last, was action. Here was the forceful Messiah I had been waiting for. The people watched in awe as he reclaimed the sacred space, as he challenged the corrupt religious authorities who collaborated with our Roman oppressors. My hope rekindled. Perhaps he had merely been waiting for this moment, for the Passover, for the gathered crowds. Perhaps the revolution would begin now, with the purification of the temple. Can you hear the wind outside? It reminds me of the murmuring crowds that filled Jerusalem's narrow streets that week. Voices hushed, yet urgent, speaking of prophecies fulfilled and kingdoms coming. Expectation hung in the air like the scent before a rainstorm. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. But the revolution did not come. Instead of rallying the people, instead of pressing his advantage after the temple incident, he retreated again to Bethany each evening. During the days, he taught in the temple courts, speaking in riddles and parables rather than clear calls to action. He debated with the Pharisees and Sadducees, besting them with his wisdom but making powerful enemies in the process. The authorities were closing in. I could sense it. I had connections among the temple elite, heard whispers of their growing determination to eliminate this troublesome teacher from Galilee. Yet he seemed either oblivious to the danger or, worse, resigned to it. You are safe now. This was long ago. It was on the third day of that week that I made my decision. He had been speaking all day in the temple, telling parables that thinly disguised his condemnation of the religious leaders. As we left the city that evening, returning to Bethany, he spoke again of his coming death. In 2 days is the Passover, he said, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. The others looked confused, uncomfortable. They never knew how to respond to these pronouncements. But I felt something harden within me. If he was determined to throw away everything we had worked for, everything we had believed in, then perhaps it was time for a different approach. Listen to my old voice and rest. I slipped away from the group that night, made my way back to Jerusalem, to the palace of the high priest, Caiaphas. I knew one of the servants there, connections I had maintained throughout our ministry. I was admitted to the presence of some members of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council. What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? I asked. The past cannot hurt you here. They were eager but cautious. They offered 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, according to our law. A paltry sum for such a betrayal, you might think. And you would be right. But the money was never my primary motivation, though the Gospels paint me as motivated by simple greed. No, I had a different plan. I believed, truly believed, that when finally arrested, with his back to the wall, he would at last reveal his power. He would call down fire from heaven or summon legions of angels, as he once said he could. He would be forced to act decisively, to fulfill his role as Messiah in the way Israel needed. The authorities would release him in terror, the Romans would be driven out, and the kingdom would be established. Or so I told myself. Can you hear the wind outside? It carries the taste of vinegar and gall tonight, bitter on my tongue as I speak these words that have remained unspoken for 40 years. The taste never leaves me, just as the phantom weight of those 30 silver pieces never leaves my palm. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. The Last Supper. That is what they call it now, I'm told. Our final Passover meal together. We gathered in an upper room in Jerusalem. The 12 of us and him, reclining at table as the custom dictates. The atmosphere was strange, heavy with unspoken tension. He seemed sorrowful yet composed, as if walking a path he had long anticipated. During the meal, he did something unexpected. He rose, wrapped a towel around his waist, and began to wash our feet. Our feet, the task of the lowliest servant, performed by the one we called Master and Lord. When he came to me, I could barely look at him. Did he know what I had already set in motion? His hands were gentle as they cradled my foot, the water cool against my dusty skin. I felt the weight of the 30 silver pieces already burning in the purse at my side. You are safe now. This was long ago. Then came the moment that has haunted my dreams for 40 years. As we ate, he suddenly said, "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." The room fell silent. One by one, the others asked, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord?" I had to ask as well, to avoid suspicion. "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi?" His eyes met mine. Those eyes that had first seen through me by the Jordan River now pierced me again. "You have said so," he replied quietly. "Listen to my old voice and rest." He knew, of course, he knew. Later, he dipped a piece of bread and handed it to me. "What you are about to do, do quickly," he said. The others thought he was sending me on an errand to buy provisions or give something to the poor. They did not understand the significance of that morsel of bread, the identification of the betrayer. I left the room immediately. The night air felt cold after the warmth of the upper room. The streets of Jerusalem were dark, lit only by occasional torches and the Passover moon rising full and accusatory over the Mount of Olives. I went directly to the chief priests, told them he would be going to Gethsemane after the meal, as was his custom. It would be the perfect place for a quiet arrest, away from the crowds who might try to protect him. The past cannot hurt you here. They gave me a detachment of temple guards and some Roman soldiers. I led them through the dark streets, out of the city gate, across the Kidron Valley. The brook was flowing with spring rains and snowmelt from the mountains. We crossed it, our torches reflecting in its surface like wandering stars. I had told the guards, "The one I kiss is the man, arrest him." A kiss, the greeting of a friend, a disciple, perverted into a sign of betrayal. Why a kiss? Perhaps some part of me wanted one last connection with him before whatever was to come. Perhaps it was simply the most natural way to identify him without raising immediate alarm. Can you hear the wind outside? It sounds like the rustling of olive leaves tonight, like the quiet sounds of men praying in a garden under ancient trees. I hear it constantly, that soft rustling, punctuated by the metallic clank of soldiers' armor approaching through the night. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. We found them in the garden. Most of the disciples were sleeping, typical of them, unable to keep watch even in this critical hour. He was a little distance away, and even in the flickering torchlight, I could see his face was strained, as if he had been wrestling with some great burden. When he saw us approaching, he did not run, he did not hide. He came forward to meet us. I stepped ahead of the soldiers, approached him with the greeting that had been agreed upon. "Greetings, Rabbi," I said, and kissed him. His response cuts me still, sharper than any blade. "Friend, do what you came for." Friend, he called me friend even in that moment. Not traitor, not betrayer, not Judas. Friend, you are safe now. This was long ago. The soldiers moved forward to seize him. One of the others, Peter, always impetuous, drew a sword and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his ear. Now, I thought, now he will reveal his power. Now the revolution begins. But instead, he rebuked Peter. "Put your sword back in its place," he said, "for all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way? Then he touched the servant's ear and healed him, healed the man who had come to arrest him. And I knew in that moment that I had catastrophically misunderstood everything. Listen to my old voice and rest. They bound his hands and led him away. The disciples scattered into the night, fleeing in terror. All except Peter and another, who followed at a distance. And me. I followed too, but not closely. Not as a disciple anymore, as what, a curious bystander, a horrified architect of disaster, a man beginning to realize the magnitude of his mistake. The past cannot hurt you here. I trailed the procession back to Jerusalem, to the house of the high priest. They took him inside for questioning while I lingered in the courtyard, watching the servants build up the fire against the night's chill. Peter was there too, warming himself, denying any association with the prisoner when questioned. At least he had that much sense, though I would later hear that remorse overwhelmed him at the sound of the rooster's crow. I did not approach the fire. I stayed in the shadows, listening to the muffled sounds of the interrogation within. Occasionally a shout or a slap would carry through the walls. Dawn was approaching, grey light seeping into the eastern sky when they finally emerged. His face was bruised, his expression weary but composed as they led him away to Pilate's headquarters. The Roman governor would have to approve any execution. Can you hear the wind outside? Sometimes I think it carries his voice still, answering his accusers with a dignity I could never muster. Or sometimes it is just silence. The devastating silence when Pilate asked him if he was the king of the Jews, and he replied only, "You say so." Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I did not follow to Pilate's court. I returned instead to the temple, to the chief priests and elders. The weight of what I had done was crushing me, making it difficult to breathe, to think clearly. This was not what I had intended. He was supposed to reveal himself, to take control, to become the Messiah we needed. Instead, he had surrendered without resistance, and now they would kill him. "I have sinned," I told them, my voice breaking. "I have betrayed innocent blood." They looked at me with contempt. "What is that to us?" They replied, "That's your responsibility. You are safe now." This was long ago. I threw the silver pieces into the temple, heard them scatter across the stone floor like a shower of accusation. 30 pieces. The price of a slave. The price I had accepted for the one I once believed was the Son of God. I fled the temple, ran blindly through the morning streets of Jerusalem. The city was waking up. Pilgrims emerging from houses and inns, preparing for the Passover that would begin at sundown. None of them knew what was happening. None of them realized that history was bending around this day, that everything would be measured from this moment forward. Listen to my old voice and rest. They say I hanged myself. The Gospel of Matthew records it thus. Acts speaks of me falling headlong, my body bursting open, my intestines spilling out, a rather different end. Neither is true, though I contemplated it. Oh, how I contemplated it. I found a length of rope, carried it with me out of the city. I wandered aimlessly, the weight of my actions too heavy to bear. Eventually, I came to an old olive tree standing alone on a hillside. Its trunk was gnarled, twisted by years of wind and sun, one thick branch extending outward at just the right height. I tested its strength. It would hold. The past cannot hurt you here. I fashioned a noose, ran the rough hemp through my fingers again and again. I felt the texture of it against my neck, a preview of what was to come. The sky above was a cruel, clear blue, indifferent to my suffering. In the distance, I could see Golgotha, the place of execution. They would be taking him there soon, if they hadn't already. But I couldn't do it. Not out of fear for myself or my soul. Not out of hope for redemption, which I believed impossible. I simply couldn't bear to give the chief priests the satisfaction of such a tidy resolution. Let them wonder what became of Judas Iscariot. Let them fear my testimony, my potential change of heart that might save the Nazarene. Can you hear the wind outside? It wraps around this cave like the rope I still carry, even after 40 years. Sometimes I take it out, feel its fibers now brittle with age, and wonder if I should have used it that day. If it would have been better for me to die then, never knowing what would happen next. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I did not witness the crucifixion. I could not bring myself to join the crowds that lined the route to Golgotha, nor those that gathered to watch 3 men die in agony under the Passover sun. Instead, I hid in an abandoned storage cave outside the city walls, curled in on myself like a wounded animal, waiting for darkness to come. It was there that I felt it, a tremor running through the earth, violent enough to send loose stones rattling across the cave floor. Then another, stronger, the ground heaving beneath me. Outside, I heard shouts of alarm. Darkness had fallen unnaturally early, they said later. The temple veil had torn from top to bottom. Bodies of the dead emerged from their tombs and walked the streets of the holy city. You are safe now. This was long ago, when night truly fell. I slipped out of the cave and away from Jerusalem. I could not stay there, could not face anyone who might recognize the betrayer. I headed east, toward the wilderness, toward this place that has been my home and my prison these 40 years. I did not learn of the resurrection until weeks later, when rumors reached even this desolate place. They said the tomb was empty, that he had appeared to the women first, then to the disciples, that Thomas had doubted until invited to place his fingers in the wounds, that he had walked with 2 followers on the road to Emmaus, breaking bread with them before vanishing from sight. Listen to my old voice and rest. Did I believe these tales? I did not know what to believe. The man I had followed for 3 years had confounded every expectation, had refused to be the Messiah Israel wanted, and instead become something else, something I still struggle to comprehend. Sometimes I wondered if he might appear to me as well. In those early years, I would sometimes wake in the night, heart pounding, certain I had heard his voice calling my name. But he never came. Perhaps there are betrayals too profound for even divine forgiveness. Or perhaps, and this thought troubles me more, perhaps he forgave me long ago, and it is only I who cannot forgive myself. The past cannot hurt you here. I have had 40 years in this wilderness to contemplate the nature of evil. Was I evil? I did not intend his death, at least not consciously. I sought to force his hand, to make him become what I thought he should be. Is that evil, to impose our will upon another, to attempt to shape them to our desires, rather than accepting them as they are? Perhaps evil is not found in grand acts of malice, but in the small compromises we make with ourselves, the little lies we tell to justify our actions, the gradual erosion of principle in service to ambition. I did not wake up one morning and decide to betray the Son of God. I took coins from the purse. I questioned his methods. I doubted his mission. I grew impatient with his pace. Step by small step, I walked a path that led to that garden, to that kiss. Can you hear the wind outside? It speaks with many voices tonight. Sometimes I think I hear the others, Peter, James, John, Matthew calling me to join them around a fire, to break bread once more, but it is only the wind, only ever the wind. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. Did I have a choice? This question has haunted me through decades of solitude. Could I have chosen differently, or was I merely fulfilling a role assigned to me before the foundation of the world? He knew I would betray him. He predicted it. If the scriptures required his sacrifice, did they not also require my treachery? The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, he said at that last meal. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Better never to have been born than to be remembered forever as the betrayer. History has no greater villain than the one who betrayed the greatest good. Yet if that betrayal was necessary for salvation, as their developing theology seems to suggest, then was I not an unwitting instrument of divine purpose? You are safe now. This was long ago. I have come to believe that I did have a choice. We all do, even when playing parts in a greater story than we can comprehend. I could have trusted him despite my doubts. I could have waited to see his purpose fulfilled in his way, not mine. I could have had faith instead. I tried to control outcomes, to force events along the path I believed right. How many disasters throughout history have begun with similar intentions? How many atrocities justified by the conviction that the end would vindicate the means? Listen to my old voice and rest. You look tired, traveler. The storm that drove you to my cave has passed, but the night is deep and the desert is treacherous in darkness. Rest here until morning. I have water and a little bread to share. Simple fare, but I have learned to need little in my years of exile. The past cannot hurt you here. Let me tell you more of him, of the man I followed before I betrayed him. For all my regrets, those 3 years remain the most vivid, the most alive of my existence. To have walked with him, heard his teachings directly from his lips, witnessed his compassion in action, even with the bitter end. I cannot bring myself to wish those years undone. There was a day in Capernaum. Early in his ministry, we were staying at Peter's house, and word spread quickly that he was there. By evening, the entire town had gathered at the door, bringing their sick and demon-possessed. I remember standing back, watching as he moved among them, touching each one, speaking words of power that sent unclean spirits fleeing and restored health to broken bodies. Can you hear the wind outside? It has softened now, become a gentle susurration like the breathing of a sleeping child. It reminds me of the hush that would fall over crowds when he began to speak, everyone straining to catch every word. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. He taught us to pray, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Not the elaborate, formal prayers of the temple, but simple, direct communication with God as a loving parent. It was revolutionary, this intimate relationship with the divine. The religious authorities had erected barriers between the people and God. He swept them away with a word. I struggled with this prayer more than the others. My own father had been a harsh man, quick to criticize, slow to praise. To envision God as a father was to imagine a distant, judgmental figure waiting to punish any misstep. He seemed to sense this in me, would sometimes place his hand on my shoulder when speaking of the Father's love, as if trying to help me bridge a gap in understanding. You are safe now. This was long ago. There were women who followed him too, something rarely mentioned in the accounts I've heard filtering back to my wilderness. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Susanna, and many others. They supported our group from their own means, but they were more than financial patrons. They were disciples in their own right. though convention prevented them from being counted among the 12. He treated these women with a respect that scandalized the religious authorities and sometimes even made us uncomfortable. He spoke with the Samaritan woman at the well, a double taboo crossing both gender and ethnic boundaries. He defended the woman caught in adultery, challenging her accusers to examine their own hearts before condemning her. He accepted the worship and touch of women considered unclean by religious law. Listen to my old voice and rest. I remember Mary of Bethany sitting at his feet, the position of a disciple, while her sister Martha busied herself with preparations. When Martha complained, expecting him to send Mary back to her proper place in the kitchen, he instead affirmed Mary's choice. She has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Small moments like these revealed the heart of his kingdom more clearly than his grand pronouncements or public miracles. A kingdom where the last would be first, where service was the path to greatness, where love of enemy was commanded alongside love of neighbor. A kingdom I was too blind to see, too impatient to wait for. The past cannot hurt you here, though it has taken me 40 years of wilderness silence to begin to understand what he was offering. Not the violent overthrow of Rome, not the restoration of David's political kingdom, something far more revolutionary, the transformation of human hearts. One person at a time. Would it have succeeded? Has it succeeded? I know little of what became of his movement after my betrayal and flight. Travelers occasionally bring news, the faith spreading throughout the empire, communities forming around his teachings, persecutions under various emperors. They call themselves Christians now, I'm told, after the Greek translation of Messiah Christos, the Anointed One. Can you hear the wind outside? It carries voices singing hymns, sometimes drifting from distant monasteries established in these barren hills. New words set to ancient Hebrew melodies, praising the risen Lord. I listen, but do not join in. I have not presumed to worship since that night in the garden. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I should tell you of the Transfiguration, though I was not present for it. Peter, James, and John accompanied him up a high mountain, Mount Tabor. Some say, though the location is unimportant, what matters is what they witnessed there, which they later described to the rest of us in hushed, awestruck tones. His appearance changed, they said. His face shone like the sun, his clothes became white as light, and there appeared before them Moses and Elijah, the lawgiver and the great prophet, talking with him. Peter, always impulsive, offered to build shelters for the three of them, not knowing what else to say in such an extraordinary moment. Then a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." The disciples fell face down in terror, but he touched them and told them not to be afraid. When they looked up, Moses and Elijah were gone, and he appeared normal once more. You are safe now. This was long ago. I was jealous when I heard this account. Why had he chosen those three and not me? I was more educated, more politically astute than simple fishermen. I could have better understood the significance of Moses and Elijah appearing, could have asked more insightful questions afterward, but he rarely the candle burns lower as I speak. I was jealous when I heard this account. Why had he chosen those three and not me? I was more educated, more politically astute than simple fishermen. I could have better understood the significance of Moses and Elijah appearing, could have asked more insightful questions afterward, but he rarely explained his choices, and none of us dared question them directly. Listen to my old voice and rest. Now I understand that my very reaction revealed why I was not chosen. My pride, my belief in my own superiority, my constant calculation, these were the very qualities that made me unsuitable for such a revelation. He chose the three who could approach the mystery with open hearts, not analytical minds. He chose those who loved him without reservation, not those who sought to use him for their own vision of the future. The past cannot hurt you here. Can you hear the wind outside? It whispers secrets tonight, ancient words carried across the desert from forgotten tombs and abandoned cities. I have learned to listen in my decades here. The desert speaks to those patient enough to hear it. I was never patient. That was perhaps my greatest failing. I wanted the kingdom now, not in some unspecified future. I wanted action, not more parables about seeds and soil and wedding feasts. Time was passing. The opportunity for rebellion against Rome would not last forever. The people's enthusiasm could wane. The authorities' patience would eventually run out. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. Let me tell you of the demons. There were many instances when he cast out unclean spirits, but one stands out in my memory, the man in the region of the Gerasenes. We had crossed the Sea of Galilee, still shaken from a storm that had nearly capsized our boat, until he calmed it with a word. On the other shore, this man came running to meet us from the tombs where he lived. He was a terrible sight, naked, filthy, covered in self-inflicted wounds, chains hanging broken from his wrists, where he had snapped them with supernatural strength. He fell at Jesus' feet, and a voice not his own cried out, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me. You are safe now. This was long ago. What is your name?" Jesus asked the spirit. "Legion," it replied, "for we are many." The demons begged not to be sent out of the area, pleading instead to be sent into a large herd of pigs feeding on a nearby hillside. He gave them permission, and the unclean spirits left the man and entered the pigs. The entire herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. I remember watching this unfold, feeling both awe at his authority over the spiritual realm and discomfort at the destruction of valuable property. The pig herders certainly felt the latter. They ran to report what had happened in their town, and soon the local people came out to see for themselves. They found the formerly possessed man sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. So afraid that they pleaded with Jesus to leave their region. Listen to my old voice and rest. I never understood their reaction. They had a dangerous madman restored to sanity, yet they asked the healer to depart. Were they more concerned about the economic loss of the pigs? Or was it the demonstration of power that disturbed them, power that upended their understanding of the world? Perhaps they sensed, as I failed too, that his kind of power demanded a response, required change, could not be encountered and then conveniently forgotten. The past cannot hurt you here. The healed man begged to come with us, to join our company as we traveled. I was against it, an unstable foreigner, possibly still influenced by his experience, would be a liability. But Jesus sent him home instead, told him to tell his family and community how much God had done for him, made him a missionary to his own people, the first to spread the good news in the Decapolis region. Can you hear the wind outside? It moans through the rocks like a soul newly freed from torment, rejoicing in unexpected liberation. I have heard that sound often in these wilderness years, and wondered if it was the voice of the divine or merely the shifting of air through stone. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I should speak of the money again, for it weighs heavier on my memory than any other aspect of my betrayal. 30 pieces of silver, the traditional price for a slave gored by an ox according to our law, a symbolic amount chosen deliberately to humiliate both him and me. I can still feel their weight in my palm, see their dull gleam in the lamplight of the high priest's palace. Blood money, they called it later, too tainted even for the temple treasury once I had returned it in remorse. They used it instead to buy a potter's field as a burial place for foreigners, fulfilling, they say, a prophecy from Jeremiah. The field of blood, it became known as a Keldama in Aramaic. You are safe now. This was long ago. I have often wondered what became of those coins. Were they melted down, reshaped, and put back into circulation? Do they still exist somewhere, passed from hand to hand across centuries, carrying their invisible taint? Or are they buried with forgotten corpses in that field, turning green with verdigris beneath Jerusalem's soil? The strangest part, looking back, is how little thought I gave to the amount when it was offered. 30 pieces, 50, 100, it made no difference to my plan. I was not selling him for money. I was creating a situation that would force his hand, compel him to reveal his power and establish his kingdom. The silver was incidental, a formality to seal the arrangement. Listen to my old voice and rest. Yet that paltry sum has become my eternal identifier. Judas of the 30 silver pieces, the man who valued the Son of God at the price of a slave, the ultimate mercenary, willing to sell out anyone for financial gain. The irony cuts deep. Of all the disciples, I was the most concerned with the larger political implications of his ministry, the most invested in his success as a revolutionary Messiah. The money was never my motivation, yet history remembers me as motivated by simple greed, the most mundane, the most comprehensible of sins. The past cannot hurt you here. Perhaps it is easier that way. Better to believe the betrayer was driven by avarice than to consider the more disturbing possibility that I betrayed him because I truly believed in him, but wanted him to be something other than what he was. That my betrayal was born not of hatred, but of a twisted, controlling love that could not accept his chosen path. Can you hear the wind outside? Sometimes I fancy it carries the sound of silver pieces clinking together, a phantom music that has followed me from Jerusalem to this desolate place. 30 pieces that jingle with each gust, a currency of shame that can never be spent. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I should tell you of the raising of Lazarus, for it was perhaps the most astonishing miracle I witnessed, and paradoxically, the event that set in motion the final conspiracy against him. Lazarus was the brother of Mary and Martha, residents of Bethany, a village near Jerusalem. They were particular friends of his, and their home was a frequent refuge when we visited the capital. Word came to us that Lazarus was ill, but he made no immediate move to go to him. This sickness will not end in death, he said. It is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. We stayed where we were for 2 more days before he finally announced we would return to Judea. We protested. His last visit to Jerusalem had nearly ended in stoning. It was dangerous to go back so soon, but he was determined. Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, he told us, but I am going there to wake him up. You are safe now. This was long ago. We thought he meant natural sleep, but he clarified, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. By the time we reached Bethany, Lazarus had been in the tomb for days. The village was filled with mourners who had come to console the sisters. Martha ran out to meet him on the road, while Mary remained at home. Lord, Martha said, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. He told her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Then he spoke words that I have pondered these 40 years. I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Listen to my old voice and rest. Martha confessed her faith in him as the Messiah, then went to fetch Mary, who came quickly to meet him, falling at his feet with the same lament. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The sight of Mary weeping, along with the mourners who had followed her, affected him deeply. He asked where they had laid Lazarus, and they took him to the tomb, a cave, with a stone laid across the entrance. And then, to our amazement, he wept. I had never seen him weep before. He who calmed storms, cast out demons, healed the sick with a touch. He stood before this tomb and shed tears. It was the most human I had ever seen him, and paradoxically, the moment I found him most mysterious. Why would he weep for a man he was about to restore to life? The past cannot hurt you here. See how he loved him, the mourners said. But others questioned, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? He approached the tomb, visibly moved, and ordered the stone removed. Martha protested. The body would smell after 4 days. But he reminded her, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? They rolled the stone away. He looked up and prayed aloud, thanking the Father for hearing him, making it clear he was performing this sign for the benefit of those watching, that they might believe. Then he called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Can you hear the wind outside? It holds its breath now, as we all did in that moment, staring at the dark mouth of the tomb, wondering if we had followed a madman or the Son of God. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Take off the grave clothes and let him go, Jesus said, as matter-of-factly as if he were asking someone to pass the bread at dinner. Many of the mourners believed in him after this miracle. How could they not? But others went to the Pharisees and reported what had happened. The Jewish ruling council, the Sanhedrin, called an emergency meeting. What are we accomplishing? They asked. Here is this man performing many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and then the Romans will come and take away both our temple and our nation. It was then that Caiaphas, the high priest that year, spoke the words that sealed his fate. You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. You are safe now. This was long ago. John would later write that Caiaphas had unwittingly prophesied that Jesus would die for the Jewish nation, and not only for that nation, but also to bring together the scattered children of God. From that day on, the Gospel says, they plotted to take his life. The raising of Lazarus should have removed all doubt from my mind. Here was power beyond anything we had witnessed, authority over death itself. Yet paradoxically, this supreme miracle accelerated my disillusionment. For instead of using this power to establish his kingdom, to overthrow our oppressors, he retreated to a village called Ephraim in the wilderness, avoiding public ministry because of the growing threat against his life. Listen to my old voice and rest. I could not understand his restraint. He could call the dead from their tombs, yet he would not call the people to revolution. He could command the forces of nature, yet he would not command an army against Rome. He had the power, but refused to use it as I believed the Messiah should. And so the seeds of my betrayal took root, watered by disappointment and fertilized by ambition. I would create a situation where he had no choice but to act decisively, to finally become the leader Israel needed in its hour of crisis. The past cannot hurt you here. Can you hear the wind outside? It sighs like a dying man tonight, like last breaths exhaled on a Roman cross. I have heard that sound in my dreams for 40 years, though I never witnessed his final hours. I wonder sometimes if I would have gone through with the betrayal had I known he would not resist, would not call down angels or demonstrate his power. If I had truly understood that he intended to die, would I have led the soldiers to the garden? The Gospels suggest he predicted his death clearly and repeatedly, but we did not, could not, comprehend what he meant. Or perhaps we chose not to hear, filtering his words through our expectations until they aligned with our desires. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. There was a moment, just before that final week, when I should have recognized the truth. We were approaching Jerusalem for Passover, and he took the 12 aside privately. With unusual directness, he told us, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death, and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day he will be raised to life." Clear enough, one would think. Yet immediately afterward, James and John, through their mother, asked for positions of honor in his kingdom, to sit at his right and left hands when he came into his glory. Such a request would have made no sense if they had understood he was predicting his execution. None of us grasped the reality of what was coming. We were intoxicated by our vision of the Messiah, blind to the actual man walking beside us. You are safe now. This was long ago. I remember a conversation with Thomas as we walked toward Jerusalem that day. "Do you think he means these predictions literally?" I asked. Thomas, always the skeptic, shrugged. He speaks in parables and metaphors. This talk of death and resurrection, it must be another way of describing the death of the old order and the rising of God's kingdom. But he seems resigned, I pressed, as if he's accepted defeat before the battle has even begun. "Perhaps it's a test of our faith," Thomas suggested, "to see who remains loyal even when the cause seems lost." Or perhaps he hesitated. What? Perhaps he's afraid. He's made powerful enemies. The crowds are fickle. Rome crushes rebellions without mercy. Perhaps this talk of necessary death is just human fear. Listen to my old voice and rest. I seized on this explanation eagerly. Fear was understandable, human, the weight of expectation, the danger of his position, who wouldn't experience moments of doubt. But fear could be overcome. With the right prompting, the right circumstances, his courage would assert itself. His true power would emerge when backed into a corner. The past cannot hurt you here. I was wrong about everything. His predictions were literal. His restraint was not fear, but purpose. His apparent weakness concealed a strength I could not comprehend, the strength to surrender, to sacrifice, to save through suffering rather than conquest. Can you hear the wind outside? It speaks in tongues tonight, incomprehensible syllables that might be wisdom if only I had ears to hear. For 40 years I have listened, hoping for revelation, for absolution, for some sign that my existence has not been merely a cautionary tale. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I want to tell you about the children. There was an afternoon in Perea, during our journey toward Jerusalem, when mothers began bringing their little ones to him, asking that he place his hands on them and pray for them. We disciples intervened, scolding these women for bothering the Master with such trivial matters when he was engaged in the serious business of preparing for the kingdom. He was indignant at our interference. "Let the little children come to me," he said sharply, "and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Then he added something that puzzled us greatly. "Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it. You are safe now." This was long ago. He took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. I watched from a distance, uncomfortable with the display. What did children know of kingdoms and power and the restoration of Israel? How could their naive trust be a model for receiving the kingdom? It seemed backward, contrary to all wisdom. The kingdom would require strategy, strength, cunning, adult virtues, not childish simplicity. Yet I remember the light in his eyes as he knelt among them, the gentleness of his hands on their heads, the genuine delight he took in their presence. He was never more at ease than in these moments, never more himself than when welcoming those considered least important. Listen to my old voice and rest. I understand now, too late, what he meant. The kingdom he spoke of could not be seized by force or cleverness or political maneuvering. It could only be received as a gift, with the open-handed trust of a child. I was too full of myself, too convinced of my own insight and importance, to empty myself and receive what he was truly offering. The past cannot hurt you here. There is a particular moment that haunts me, from the day after his entry into Jerusalem. We were returning to the city from Bethany in the morning, and he was hungry. Seeing a fig tree in leaf, he went to find fruit on it, but there was none, only leaves, for it was not the season for figs. He cursed the tree. "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." The next morning, as we passed the same spot, the fig tree was withered from the roots. Peter pointed it out, amazed at how quickly the curse had taken effect. He responded with a teaching about faith and prayer that seemed disconnected from the incident. Have faith in God. Truly I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, "Go, throw yourself into the sea," and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Can you hear the wind outside? It rustles like fig leaves tonight, dry and lifeless, stripped of vitality by a word of power. I have pondered that withered tree for decades, seeing in it a reflection of my own soul, outwardly flourishing with the appearance of discipleship, but bearing no fruit of true faith when examined. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak, but I am not here to speak of myself. You asked about him, about the one I betrayed. Let me tell you of his hands. Strange, the details that remain vivid after so many years. His hands were those of a worker, strong, calloused, from years of carpentry before his ministry began. Yet they were also infinitely gentle when touching the sick or blessing children. I remember watching those hands break bread at our shared meals, the deliberate care with which he tore the loaf and distributed it among us. The same hands that later, at our final meal together, he declared were his body, broken for us. I did not understand then. How could I? The metaphor seemed strained, unnecessarily morbid, another example of his growing preoccupation with death. You are safe now. This was long ago. His hands on the last night, washing our feet, taking each foot in turn, cradling it in his palms, pouring water over the dust and grime, drying with a towel wrapped around his waist. When he came to me, I could barely look at him. My mind was already made up, the arrangement with the chief priests already settled. Yet he knelt before me, servant to betrayer, and washed my feet with the same care he showed to John, his beloved disciple. Did he know then? Of course he knew. He had always known, from the beginning. Have I not chosen you, the 12? He said once, yet one of you is a devil. That was after many of his followers had deserted him, unable to accept his teaching that they must eat his flesh and drink his blood to have life. Words that seemed like madness then, that I now understand, referred to the complete assimilation of his nature, his way, his truth. Listen to my old voice and rest. He knew what I would do, yet chose me anyway. Called me friend even in the moment of betrayal. Washed the feet that would lead soldiers to his arrest. What manner of love is this? It remains incomprehensible to me, even after 40 years of contemplation. The past cannot hurt you here. I have had decades to consider the nature of power. He said to Pilate, according to reports that reached me later, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest. But now my kingdom is from another place. Not of this world. Not established by force of arms, or political maneuvering, or popular uprising. A kingdom of truth, he told the Roman governor, who famously asked, "What is truth?" and did not wait for an answer before condemning an innocent man to death. Can you hear the wind outside? It rushes now like the breath of God over creation, like the Spirit he promised would come after his departure. They say it did come at Pentecost, tongues of fire. Disciples speaking in languages they had never learned, thousands converting in a day. The beginning of what they now call the church, the ecclesia, the called out ones. I was not there. I was already in the wilderness by then, beginning my long exile of remorse. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I should tell you of the storm on the Sea of Galilee, for it reveals something essential about him, about the nature of his power and his relationship with his followers. We were crossing the sea in the evening, heading for the eastern shore. He was exhausted from a day of teaching and fell asleep in the stern on a cushion. A furious storm arose suddenly, as often happens on that lake. The waves broke over the boat, nearly swamping it. Several of us were experienced fishermen, accustomed to the sea's moods, but even they grew frightened as the situation worsened. Finally, in desperation, they woke him. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" they cried. "You are safe now. This was long ago." He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." The wind died down, and it was completely calm. Then he turned to us, his expression a mixture of disappointment and compassion. "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" We were terrified by this display of authority over the elements. "Who is this?" we whispered among ourselves. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." It was a question we would ask repeatedly throughout our time with him, never quite arriving at an answer that encompassed the reality of the man who walked beside us. Listen to my old voice and rest. I have thought often of that question during my desert solitude. Who was he? The answers I once held with such certainty have dissolved like mirages on the horizon, leaving me with mystery rather than knowledge. Was he merely a great teacher who met a tragic end? The long-awaited Messiah who established a kingdom not of this world? The Son of God incarnate, as his followers now proclaim? I knew him more intimately than most who speak his name today. I broke bread with him daily for nearly 3 years. I witnessed his miracles, heard his teachings directly from his lips, observed his interactions with followers and opponents alike. Yet I cannot claim to have known him truly. I saw what I wanted to see, a revolutionary leader, a political messiah, and missed the true nature of his mission until it was too late. The past cannot hurt you here. His call to love enemies and pray for persecutors. His insistence that the last shall be first and the first last. His elevation of the poor in spirit, the meek, the merciful, the peacemakers. All these teachings I heard but did not truly hear, filtering them through my expectations until they aligned with my vision of the coming kingdom. Can you hear the wind outside? It keens like a mother mourning her son tonight. I have sometimes wondered about his mother, Mary. What became of her after his execution? John would care for her. Surely the beloved disciple to whom Jesus entrusted her from the cross. Another moment I missed, another responsibility I abandoned in my cowardice and remorse. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I recall a day when his mother and brothers came looking for him while he was teaching. The crowd was so dense they could not reach him, so they passed word that they were outside asking for him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside, wanting to see you." He replied, "My mother and brothers are those who hear God's word and put it into practice. You are safe now." This was long ago. I remember being shocked by this apparent dismissal of his family obligations. In our culture, family bonds were sacred, second only to duty to God. Yet here he was, redefining family in terms of spiritual rather than blood relationships, creating a new kind of community bound by shared commitment to the kingdom rather than ties of kinship. It was radical then. It remains radical now. A vision of human connection transcending the tribal, the familiar, the safe, expanding the circle of concern beyond those who look like us, speak like us, believe like us, including even the enemy, the outcast, the unclean in this new family of God. Listen to my old voice and rest. I have had 40 years to ponder the implications of such a vision. If truly implemented, it would transform society more thoroughly than any political revolution. Perhaps that is why I could not embrace it. The cost seemed too high, the timeline too long, the results too uncertain. I wanted immediate change, tangible victory, not the slow leavening of human hearts over generations. The past cannot hurt you here. There was a rich young ruler who came to him once, asking what he must do to inherit eternal life. Jesus recited the commandments, and the young man claimed to have kept them all since his youth. Then Jesus looked at him with love. I remember the tenderness in his expression, and said, "One thing you lack. Go. Sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." The man's face fell, and he went away sad, for he had great wealth. Jesus watched him go, then turned to us. How hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. He said, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God." Can you hear the wind outside? It whispers of riches beyond counting tonight. Treasures that moth and rust cannot destroy, that thieves cannot break in and steal. I wonder sometimes what became of that young ruler. Did he reconsider later? Did he find a way to loosen his grip on his possessions, or did he cling to them until death finally separated him from his wealth? Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I should tell you of the woman at Simon the leper's house, for her story intertwines with mine in the gospel accounts. This was in Bethany, just days before the end. We were dining at Simon's home, a man Jesus had presumably healed of leprosy, though he still bore the name of his former affliction. During the meal, a woman came in with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. It was an extravagant gesture, overwhelming the room with fragrance, expressing devotion that transcended practical concerns. You are safe now. This was long ago. Some of those present, the Gospel of John identifies me specifically, were indignant. Why this waste of perfume, we asked. It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor, We rebuked her harshly for her impractical worship, but he defended her. "Leave her alone," he said. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them any time you want. But you will not always have me." She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Then he made a statement that has echoed through centuries. "Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Listen to my old voice and rest." How right he was. Her act of devotion is remembered, while my practical objections are seen for what they truly were, not concern for the poor, but for the purse I controlled. The contrast could not be starker. Her extravagant love, my calculated betrayal, her name blessed, mine cursed, her memory celebrated wherever the gospel is preached, mine a cautionary tale of the darkest treachery. The past cannot hurt you here. It was after this incident, the Gospels record, that I went to the chief priests with my offer of betrayal. The timing suggests that his defense of the woman's waist, his talk of burial, his seeming resignation to death rather than triumph, finally pushed me to take matters into my own hands, to force the confrontation that would either reveal him as the military messiah I believed he must be, or expose him as something less. Can you hear the wind outside? It carries the lingering scent of nard tonight, a phantom fragrance that reminds me of what true devotion looks like. Not calculated service with an eye to reward, but reckless, impractical, wholehearted love that counts no cost to great. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. He spoke often of the end times, especially during that final week in Jerusalem, sitting on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the temple complex. He described signs that would precede the end of the age, wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, earthquakes, famines, persecution of his followers. Many will come in my name, claiming, "I am he," and will deceive many, he warned. He spoke of a time of unparalleled distress, when the sun would be darkened and the moon would not give its light, when the stars would fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies would be shaken. You are safe now. This was long ago. At that time people will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory, he said. And he will send his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the heavens. We pressed him for specifics. When would these things happen? He would not give a date, saying that no one knows the day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. He urged vigilance, readiness, faithful service in his absence. Listen to my old voice and rest. I have lived 40 years waiting for these signs to manifest, scanning the horizon for clouds bearing the Son of Man in glory. The skies remain empty of all but stars and birds and the occasional storm. Jerusalem fell to the Romans, the temple destroyed just as he predicted. Wars have come and gone. Earthquakes and famines continue to afflict humanity. But the cosmic signs, the gathering of the elect, these remain unfulfilled. Or perhaps I simply cannot see their fulfillment from my desert cave, cut off from the community of believers, isolated in my shame. Perhaps the kingdom has indeed come, not with cosmic spectacle, but in the quiet transformation of human hearts, one by one, generation by generation. The past cannot hurt you here. He told a parable once of a farmer who sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone was sleeping, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat. When the wheat sprouted, the weeds also appeared. The farmer's servants asked if they should pull up the weeds, but the farmer refused, saying, "No, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them." Let both grow together until the harvest. Can you hear the wind outside? It rustles like wheat fields tonight, ripe for harvest. I have often wondered which I am, wheat or weed, chosen disciple or enemy who sowed destruction. Perhaps both, as all humans contain contradictions, the capacity for both faith and betrayal, love and treachery. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. He told another parable that final week about a man who entrusted his property to his servants before going on a journey. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one with 5 bags put his money to work and gained 5 more. The one with 2 bags gained 2 more, but the servant who received 1 bag dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. You are safe now. This was long ago. When the master returned, he praised the first 2 servants, saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." But to the servant who had buried his gold, he said, "You wicked, lazy servant. You knew that I harvest where I have not sown, and gathered where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned I would have received it back with interest." He took the bag of gold from him and gave it to the one who had 10 bags. "For whoever has will be given more," he explained, "and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. Listen to my old voice and rest. I was given much, a place among the 12, a position of trust, proximity to the Son of God himself. What did I do with these gifts? Did I multiply them in faithful service? Did I even preserve them intact? No, I squandered everything, exchanging the priceless for 30 pieces of silver, trading eternal significance for a moment of control. The past cannot hurt you here. Yet even in this failure, I served his purpose, played my role in the unfolding drama of salvation. Would his sacrifice have occurred without my betrayal? Would another have taken my place? Or was I chosen specifically for this task, predestined to be the vehicle of necessary treachery? The Son of Man will go, just as it is written about him, he said at our last meal. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Can you hear the wind outside? It groans like one under a curse tonight, bearing the weight of divine woe. For 40 years I have carried those words, wondering if any redemption is possible for the betrayer named before the foundation of the past cannot hurt you here. Yet even in this failure, I served his purpose, played my role in the unfolding drama of salvation. Would his sacrifice have occurred without my betrayal? Would another have taken my place? Or was I chosen specifically for this task, predestined to be the vehicle of necessary treachery? The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him. He said at our last meal, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Can you hear the wind outside? It groans like one under a curse tonight, bearing the weight of divine woe. For 40 years I have carried those words, wondering if any redemption is possible for the betrayer named before the foundation of the world. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I have told you of the betrayal, but not of what came after, not of my flight from the temple, the silver pieces scattering across the stone floor, not of my desperate wandering through Jerusalem's streets as the news spread of his arrest, his appearance before the Sanhedrin, his transfer to Pilate's jurisdiction. I did not witness his trials. I did not see Pilate wash his hands of innocent blood. I did not hear the crowd choose Barabbas over him when offered a prisoner to release, as was customary during the festival. I did not follow the procession to Golgotha, did not watch as nails pierced the hands that had broken bread with me, the feet I had washed the dust from many times on our journeys. You are safe now. This was long ago. They say he spoke 7 times from the cross, words of forgiveness for his executioners. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Words of promise to the repentant thief crucified beside him. Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Words of provision for his mother. Woman, here is your son, and to the beloved disciple, here is your mother. In the depths of his agony, he cried out in anguish, quoting the psalm, my God, why have you forsaken me? Later, he expressed his physical torment simply, I am thirsty. As death approached, he declared his mission complete. It is finished. And with his final breath, he entrusted himself to the Father. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Listen to my old voice and rest. 7 utterances that, taken together, revealed the heart of the man I followed, betrayed, and fled from. Forgiveness, promise, provision, honesty about suffering, acknowledgement of human need, completion of purpose, and ultimate trust. Even in extremity, even in abandonment, he embodied the kingdom he proclaimed. The past cannot hurt you here. I wonder sometimes if he would have included me in that blanket forgiveness had I stood at the foot of the cross. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Did I know what I was doing? Not fully, certainly. I did not anticipate his surrender, his refusal to defend himself. I did not expect the situation to spiral so rapidly toward execution. But I knew I was betraying trust. I knew I was acting against the will of the one I had pledged to follow. I knew I was choosing my vision of the kingdom over his. My sin was not ignorance, but arrogance, the belief that I understood better than he what needed to happen. Can you hear the wind outside? It carries echoes of hammers striking nails tonight, of labored breathing, of a torn veil and earthquake tremors. Sounds I never heard directly, yet they have formed the background music of my exile, the soundtrack to my solitary penance. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. The empty tomb. I must speak of the empty tomb, though I did not see it with my own eyes. By the time the women discovered it on the first day of the week, I was already fleeing Jerusalem, my faith shattered, my future blank as the desert horizon. Mary Magdalene was the first to find the stone rolled away, the body gone. She ran to tell Peter and John, who raced to investigate. John outran Peter but waited outside while the older disciple entered first. Finding the burial cloths lying there, the head covering folded separately from the linen wrappings, John followed, saw, and believed, though the Gospels tell us they still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. You are safe now. This was long ago. Mary remained at the tomb, weeping. When she looked inside, she saw 2 angels where the body had been. They asked why she was crying, and she explained that someone had taken her Lord's body. Turning, she saw a man she took to be the gardener and asked if he had moved the body. He spoke just one word, her name, Mary, and she recognized him immediately. Rabboni, she cried, reaching for him. Do not hold on to me, he told her, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. So Mary Magdalene became the first apostle of the resurrection, the first to proclaim, I have seen the Lord. A woman, one from whom he had cast out 7 demons, one whose testimony would not even be admissible in Jewish courts, was entrusted with the most important news in human history. Another inversion of expectations. Another demonstration that his kingdom operated by different rules than the kingdoms of this world. Listen to my old voice and rest. Later that same day, he appeared to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus, though they did not recognize him until he broke bread with them. That evening, he came to the 11 gathered in Jerusalem, showing them his hands and side as proof of his identity. Thomas was absent and refused to believe the other's testimony without tangible evidence. A week later, Jesus appeared again and invited the doubter to touch his wounds. "Stop doubting and believe," he said. Thomas's response has echoed through centuries. "My Lord and my God." The past cannot hurt you here. There were other appearances over a 40-day period, to 7 disciples fishing on the Sea of Galilee, to more than 500 believers at one time, to James, to all the apostles again, and finally, on the Mount of Olives, he gave them their commission to make disciples of all nations, promised the coming of the Holy Spirit, and was taken up into heaven before their eyes. I heard all this second-hand, of course, from travelers who passed through these wilderness regions in the months and years following. Stories that grew more elaborate, more theological with each retelling. Did I believe them? I scarcely knew what to believe anymore. That something extraordinary had happened, yes. That the movement had not died with him on the cross, certainly. But resurrection, ascension, these seemed beyond credibility. Can you hear the wind outside? It rushes like the mighty wind, they say, filled the room at Pentecost. When tongues of fire rested on the disciples, and they began speaking in other languages, proclaiming the wonders of God to pilgrims from every nation under heaven. Another event I missed, another chapter in the story that unfolded without me. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. They established a community in Jerusalem, those first believers, devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, to prayer, shared everything in common, sold property and possessions to meet any need that arose, broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. It was everything he had taught us. The kingdom should be not a political entity, but a new kind of community, bound by love rather than force, sharing freely rather than accumulating, serving rather than dominating. The kingdom come not through conquest, but through willing transformation, one heart at a time. You are safe now. This was long ago. Persecution came eventually, of course. Stephen stoned for his bold testimony before the Sanhedrin, becoming the first martyr. The believers scattered throughout Judea and Samaria, though the apostles remained in Jerusalem, but the scattering only spread the message further, as those who fled preached the word wherever they went. The movement extended beyond Judaism when Peter was sent to Cornelius, a Roman centurion, and witnessed the Holy Spirit fall on Gentile believers. Then came Paul, once Saul, the great persecutor of the church, transformed by an encounter with the risen Christ on the Damascus road. He became the apostle to the Gentiles, establishing communities of believers throughout Asia Minor and Greece, even reaching Rome itself. Listen to my old voice and rest. I followed these developments from a distance, through occasional reports from passing travelers. The Jesus movement was becoming something new, not a sect within Judaism, as I had expected, but a distinct faith that claimed to fulfill and transcend the Old Covenant. They called themselves followers of the way at first, then Christians, little Christs in Antioch. Their central proclamation shocked me, that Jesus of Nazareth was not merely a prophet or teacher, or even the Messiah in the traditional sense, but God incarnate, that in him the fullness of deity had dwelt bodily, that through his death and resurrection he had reconciled humanity to God, offering forgiveness of sins and eternal life to all who believed. The past cannot hurt you here. It was so far from what I had expected, from what any of us had expected. Not a restored Davidic kingdom, but a spiritual revolution that transcended national boundaries. Not freedom from Rome, but freedom from sin and death. Not a military messiah, but a suffering servant who conquered through sacrifice. Had I completely misunderstood him from the beginning? Or had his mission evolved in response to rejection, taking a new direction when the original plan proved untenable? The latter explanation would make my betrayal more comprehensible, less a cosmic blunder and more a tragic misalignment of expectations. But the Gospels suggest otherwise, that he had intended this path all along, had predicted his death and resurrection repeatedly, had seen his mission in terms of universal salvation rather than national liberation from the very start. Can you hear the wind outside? It whispers like pages turning tonight, like scrolls being unrolled and read in synagogues and house churches across the empire. The story continuing without me, the meaning of his life and death being interpreted by others who had not walked as closely with him, yet had understood him far better than I ever did. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I have had 40 years to ponder the nature of sin. Is sin simply missing the mark, falling short of God's glory, as Paul would later write? Is it rebellion against divine authority? Is it choosing our will over God's? Or is it, at its most fundamental, a failure to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves? My betrayal encompassed all these dimensions. I missed the mark, failing to recognize the true nature of his kingdom. I rebelled against his authority, substituting my plan for his. I chose my will over his explicit teachings and example. And most fundamentally, I failed to love, to trust his wisdom, to honor his choices, to place his good above my ambition. You are safe now. This was long ago. He taught that sin begins in the heart, long before it manifests in action. For from within, out of the heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly, he said. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. My betrayal did not begin in the garden with a kiss. It began much earlier, with doubts harbored, with ambitions nurtured, with judgments formed about his methods and timeline. By the time I approached the chief priests, the real betrayal had already occurred internally. I had already abandoned trust, already placed my understanding above his, already decided that my vision of the kingdom trumped his. Listen to my old voice and rest. Sin, I have learned, is not primarily about breaking rules. It is about broken relationship. It is about the rupture that occurs when trust is abandoned, when love is subordinated to self-interest, when the other becomes a means to our ends rather than an end in themselves. My betrayal was the ultimate objectification, reducing the Son of Man to a tool for advancing my agenda. The past cannot hurt you here. He warned us about this. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? He asked. I forfeited everything for 30 pieces of silver and the brief illusion of control. The silver returned to the temple, the control revealed as delusion, my soul damaged beyond my ability to repair it. Can you hear the wind outside? It sighs with resignation tonight, with acceptance of what cannot be changed. For 40 years I have lived with my choice, neither justifying it nor expecting absolution. I simply carry it, day by day, night by night, through seasons of torment and seasons of numb detachment. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I have wondered often about repentance. Peter denied him 3 times, yet was restored, becoming a pillar of the early church. What made his failure different from mine? Was it merely a matter of degree, denial versus active betrayal, or was it something deeper? The quality of our remorse, the nature of our response to our own failure. Peter wept bitterly when the rooster crowed, when he remembered Jesus' prediction of his denial. But he did not flee permanently. He remained connected to the community of disciples. And crucially, he was present to encounter the risen Christ, to receive forgiveness directly, to be commissioned anew with the instruction to feed my sheep. You are safe now. This was long ago. I wept too, alone in the temple courtyard, as I tried to return the blood money. I have sinned. I confess to the chief priests and elders, for I have betrayed innocent blood. But they offered no absolution, no path forward. What is that to us? That's your responsibility. So I fled from them, from the disciples, from Jerusalem, from any possibility of encounter with the one I had betrayed. My remorse led not to restoration, but to isolation, not to new life, but to this living death in the wilderness. I chose my own penance rather than risking the harder path of seeking forgiveness. Listen to my old voice and rest. True repentance, I have come to believe, requires more than remorse. It requires the courage to face those we have wronged, to remain in community despite our shame, to accept forgiveness when offered. It requires, ultimately, the willingness to be transformed rather than merely punished. The past cannot hurt you here. I lacked that courage. Finding the prospect of facing him more terrifying than exile, I chose this cave, these 40 years of solitude, this slow withering of body and soul in the desert sun. A punishment of my own devising, neither requested nor required by the one I betrayed. Can you hear the wind outside? It keens like mourning women tonight, lamenting not only what was lost, but what might have been. The role I might have played in the early church, had I found the courage to return, to face the community, to seek restoration. The testimony I might have offered of his mercy, had I allowed myself to receive it. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I have had 40 years to contemplate the meaning of his death. The early believers quickly developed a theology of atonement, that his blood was shed for the forgiveness of sins, that he was the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, that through his sacrifice, a new covenant was established between God and humanity. It was foreshadowed in the Passover itself, the blood of the Lamb on the doorposts, protecting the firstborn from death. It was predicted in Isaiah's suffering servant, wounded for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities, bringing us peace through his punishment, healing through his wounds. It was enacted in the temple sacrifices, the offering of a pure victim to atone for the impurity of the people. You are safe now. This was long ago. But these theological formulations, however scripturally grounded, cannot capture the personal dimension of what happened that day on Golgotha. A man I knew intimately, whose voice I would recognize among thousands, whose mannerisms and expressions were as familiar to me as my own, suffered and died in agony, and I had set that death in motion, whatever larger purpose it may have served in the divine economy. Theology can explain the cosmic significance of the cross. It cannot absolve me of the human reality of betrayal, of the interpersonal wound inflicted by my kiss in the garden. That requires not theological understanding, but personal forgiveness. something I never gave myself the opportunity to receive. Listen to my old voice and rest. I wonder sometimes what he would say to me if I stood before him now. Would he remind me of his words from the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing"? Would he echo his instruction to Peter to forgive not 7 times, but 77 times? Would he tell the parable of the prodigal son, assuring me that the Father watches the horizon daily for returning children, no matter how grievous their departure? Or would he simply say my name, as he did with Mary at the tomb, Judas, in that tone that always made me feel fully known, yet fully accepted? One word that would contain within it all the complex history between us, all the potential for reconciliation, all the love that never diminished despite my failure. The past cannot hurt you here. I will never know in this life. The opportunity for direct reconciliation passed when I chose flight over return, isolation over community, self-punishment over submitted repentance. Now I wait for whatever comes after this existence, judgment or mercy or some combination of both that my limited understanding cannot grasp. Can you hear the wind outside? It whistles through the rocks like time running short, like sands nearly exhausted in the hourglass of my life. 40 years is a biblical number. The Israelites wandered 40 years in the wilderness. Moses spent 40 days on Mount Sinai. Jesus fasted 40 days in the desert. Periods of testing, preparation, purification. What has my 40-year exile prepared me for? What purification has been accomplished in this cave of remorse? Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I have told you my story, traveler, at least, the portions that matter. Not the biographical details of birth and upbringing, education and early ambitions. Those are irrelevant now, forgotten by history, overshadowed by the one act that defines me in collective memory. I am Judas, the betrayer. Nothing more, yet I was more once. A disciple called personally by Jesus of Nazareth. A follower who left everything to join his movement. A believer, however misguided, in the coming kingdom of God. A man with hopes and fears, strengths and weaknesses, insights and blind spots, like any other human being. Like you, perhaps. You are safe now. This was long ago. The lessons of my life are not complex. Beware of certainty that blinds you to new understanding. Question your motives, especially when they align too neatly with your ambitions. Recognize that controlling others, even for what you perceive as their own good, is a form of violence. And perhaps most importantly, when you fail, as all humans do, don't flee from the community that might help you find healing. Don't exile yourself to a cave of your own making. Listen to my old voice and rest. The story is told now, the burden shared, though not lightened. Confession without absolution remains incomplete. Yet the telling itself has value. To be heard, to be witnessed in one's brokenness, there is mercy in that, even if forgiveness remains beyond reach. The past cannot hurt you here. Dawn approaches. See how the darkness at the cave's mouth has softened from black to indigo. Soon the first rays of sun will pierce the eastern horizon. Another day will begin in this wilderness that has been my home and prison these 40 years. Can you hear the wind outside? It has stilled with the approach of morning, as it often does. The desert preparing itself for the onslaught of heat and light that will soon scour its surface, revealing every contour, every crevice, leaving nowhere to hide. Sleep while I remember. The candle burns lower as I speak. I am tired now, more tired than I have ever been. This telling has taken what little strength remained in my withered frame. I will rest soon, more deeply than I have rested in decades. But first, Let me make you comfortable for what remains of the night. Here is water, cool from the stone jar. Here is bread, simple but sufficient. When you wake, follow the path east until you reach the road to Jericho. From there, you can make your way to whatever destination awaits you. You are safe now. This was long ago. Perhaps, when you return to civilization, you will hear stories of the risen Christ, of the church he established, of the kingdom that grows like a mustard seed. Small and unimpressive at first, but gradually spreading its branches until birds of every kind find shelter there. Perhaps you will even join that community, adding your thread to the tapestry being woven across the empire and beyond. Listen to my old voice and rest. If you do, and if you think of me at all, remember this: even the one known as the betrayer was loved by him. Even the one who sold him for silver was called friend in the garden. Even the one who set in motion his execution was chosen to walk with him for 3 years, to hear his teaching, to witness his miracles, to break bread at his table. The past cannot hurt you here. Whatever his plan, whatever his kingdom, it is vast enough to encompass both the faithful and the faithless, both those who recognized him and those who missed him entirely, both those who honored him and those who betrayed him. That is either terrifying or comforting, depending on where you stand. From the perspective of 40 years in this wilderness, I find it to be both simultaneously. Can you hear the wind outside? It begins to stir again with the changing temperature, the night air retreating before the advance of day. Like breath, like spirit, like the ineffable presence that has kept me company in my solitude, that has prevented me from using the rope I still carry, that has sustained me through decades of exile when despair would have been the easier choice. Sleep while I remember. The candle has burned down completely now, its flame extinguished, a thin wisp of smoke rising from the blackened wick. But there is light enough from the approaching dawn, light enough to see your face, peaceful in sleep, light enough to see the path forward, or at least the next few steps. I will leave you now, find a place outside this cave to greet the rising sun. One last sunrise after 40 years of desert mornings. The silver coins are long spent, the rope has grown brittle with age, the betrayal is decades past. Yet his face remains vivid in my memory, not as he must have looked on the cross, which I never saw, but as he appeared at our last meal together, breaking bread, offering wine, speaking of covenant and kingdom with quiet certainty. "This is my body, given for you," he said. "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins, for many, not excluding the betrayer. I have never dared to hope, yet neither have I been able to completely extinguish that possibility. And so I go to meet the dawn, carrying the weight of 30 silver pieces that have grown no lighter in 40 years, yet trusting against all reason, against all deserving, that there may yet be room in his kingdom, even for Judas of Kerioth, the one who betrayed him with a kiss.